Nothing is wrong with me, she yelled at her millionaire boss lady, who doesn't consider her smart. She gripped the edge of the mahogany desk until her knuckles went white, her voice cutting through the sterile silence of the 42nd floor. Nothing is wrong with me. And in that moment, Victoria Chen realized the quiet girl from Queens had just declared war on everything she thought she knew about power. The 5:47 a.m. subway from Jackson Heights to Manhattan carried the dreams of 1,000 strivers, but none burned quite like Zara Okafor's. She pressed her forehead against the cool window of the 7 train, watching Queens blur past in the pre-dawn darkness, her reflection a ghost against the industrial landscape. At 26, she had the kind of beauty that whispered rather than shouted. Ethiopian features softened by her grandmother's stories, dark eyes that held galaxies of unspoken thoughts, and skin the color of rich coffee that her mother had taught her to love despite a world that often didn't. In her weathered leather bag, a notebook thick with sketches and equations sat beside her laptop. Innovations that could revolutionize sustainable technology, ideas that danced in her mind during sleepless nights. But those dreams felt as distant as the glittering Manhattan skyline that rose before her like a mountain range of impossible aspirations. The train lurched, and Zara's hand instinctively moved to steady the cup of coffee she'd bought from Ahmed's corner bodega. The same order every morning for 3 years. Ahmad knew her name, her dreams, her fears. He'd escaped Syria with nothing but hope, and now owned 3 blocks of Jackson Heights through sheer will. "Your mind is a gift, Zara," he'd tell her when she'd stopped by defeated after another day of being invisible. "Don't let them make you forget." But forgetting felt safer than remembering. Easier than carrying the weight of potential in a world that had already decided her worth. The doors opened at Grand Central, and Zara joined the river of humanity flowing toward their daily performances. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her carefully chosen blazer, professional but not too expensive, confident but not threatening, and began her transformation from dreamer to assistant, from brilliant to invisible. 27 floors above, Victoria Chen stood in her corner office like a general surveying her empire. At 38, she had conquered Manhattan's tech scene with the methodical precision of someone who understood that sentiment was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her office was a temple of minimalism. All clean lines and strategic spaces, every element chosen to project power without warmth. The city stretched below her like a circuit board, each light a connection in the network she'd built through 18-hour days and calculated risks. Chen Dynamics had grown from a startup in her Queens apartment to a billion-dollar empire in just 12 years. But the girl who'd once shared that apartment with 3 other immigrants felt like a stranger now. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman who'd learned to wear success like armor. Tailored suits that cost more than most people's rent, hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, makeup applied with the precision of war paint. She was beautiful in the way that mountains were beautiful, impressive, untouchable, and slightly terrifying. But beneath the polish, Victoria carried her own ghosts. The memory of her father's calloused hands, rough from years of washing dishes in Chinatown restaurants. The sound of her mother's quiet tears when the bills came due. The professors who'd spoken over her in graduate school, the investors who'd questioned her accent, the board members who still sometimes asked if she was taking minutes instead of running the meeting. She'd built her empire on the foundation of proving them all wrong, but somewhere along the way, she'd forgotten how to let anyone close enough to see the scared girl from Flushing who still lived beneath the CEO's confidence. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, not turning from the window. Zara entered carrying the morning reports, her footsteps silent on the polished concrete floor. She'd been Victoria's assistant for 3 years, efficient and nearly invisible, which was exactly how Victoria preferred her staff. Useful but unremarkable, present but not persistent. "The quarterly projections are on your desk," Zara said quietly, her voice carrying the faint music of her grandmother's Amharic accent. "The board presentation is at 10, lunch with the Samsung executives at 12:30, and the sustainability team wants 5 minutes to discuss the new proposals." Victoria nodded without turning. In 3 years, she'd learned to rely on Zara's efficiency, but she'd never really looked at her. Not in the way that mattered. To Victoria, Zara was simply another moving part in the machine, competent but unremarkable. But if Victoria had turned, If she'd really looked, she might have seen the way Zara's eyes lingered on the whiteboard covered in energy equations, the way her fingers traced patterns in the air when she thought no one was watching, the way she held herself like someone carrying invisible wings. "The sustainability proposals," Victoria said, finally turning. "Are they worth my time?" Zara hesitated, and in that pause, something flickered across her face. Frustration maybe, or the ghost of an opinion she'd never been asked to share. "They're comprehensive," she said carefully. "Comprehensive doesn't mean profitable," Victoria replied, her tone dismissive. "I didn't build this company on comprehensive. I built it on smart." The words hung in the air like a slap, and Zara's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. For just a moment, Victoria saw something flash in those dark eyes. Not anger, exactly, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. The look of someone who'd been underestimated so many times they'd started to believe it themselves. But the moment passed, and Zara simply nodded. "Of course. I'll reschedule them." As Zara turned to leave, Victoria caught herself almost saying something else. Almost asking what she thought, almost acknowledging that flicker of intelligence she'd glimpsed. But she'd built her empire on certainty, on never showing weakness or doubt. So she said nothing, and Zara left, and neither woman realized they'd just lit the fuse on something that would change everything. What do you think happens when two brilliant minds finally collide? Have you ever felt underestimated in your workplace? Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your stories about finding your voice in difficult situations. The explosion came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, in the sterile conference room where dreams went to die. Zara sat in her usual position, back corner, notepad ready, invisible as wallpaper, while Victoria dismantled the sustainability team's proposal with surgical precision. The 6-person team had spent months developing a revolutionary carbon capture system that could transform industrial waste into renewable energy. Their presentation was flawless, their data irrefutable, their passion evident in every slide. Victoria destroyed it in 12 minutes. "The ROI timeline is unrealistic," she said, her voice carrying the cold authority of someone who'd never been wrong about money. 18 months to break even on a system this complex? Either you're lying to me or lying to yourselves. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, the team lead, shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Chen, with respect, our projections are conservative. We've run the numbers." "I don't pay you to run numbers, Dr. Rodriguez. I pay you to make money." Victoria's eyes swept the room with the calculated indifference of a predator. "This isn't a charity. We're not here to save the world on wishful thinking and good intentions." Zara's pen stopped moving. She'd read their proposal, really read it, not just filed it. She'd spent her lunch breaks in the building's technical library, cross-referencing their algorithms with papers from MIT and Stanford. The system wasn't just viable, it was revolutionary. It could reduce carbon emissions by 30% while generating profits that would dwarf their current revenue streams. But more than that, it was beautiful, elegant in its simplicity, bold in its vision. Everything she'd dreamed of creating during those long nights in her Queen's apartment, sketching solutions to problems the world pretended didn't exist. "The market analysis shows," Dr. Rodriguez tried again. "The market analysis shows you've been reading too many academic papers and not enough quarterly reports." Victoria cut her off. "I built this company on smart decisions, not smart dreams." Next presentation. That's when Zara saw it. The exact moment Dr. Rodriguez's shoulders sagged, when the light went out of her eyes. It was the same look Zara had seen in her own mirror 1,000 times. The expression of someone being told their best wasn't good enough. Their intelligence wasn't intelligent enough. Their worth wasn't worth enough. Something inside Zara's chest began to crack. "Actually," she heard herself say, and the words seemed to echo in the sudden silence. 6 faces turned toward her, including Victoria's, all wearing the same expression of surprise. Assistants didn't speak in these meetings. They certainly didn't interrupt. "Excuse me." Victoria's voice carried a warning that would have sent most people scrambling for cover. But Zara was already standing, her notepad forgotten, 3 years of swallowed words rising in her throat like a tide. "I said actually, the market analysis is brilliant. Dr. Rodriguez and her team have created something that could revolutionize how we think about industrial waste. And you're dismissing it because it doesn't fit your 18-month profit model." The room went dead silent. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes widened. Victoria's face became a mask of controlled fury. "Sit down, Zara," Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Zara was done sitting down. Done being invisible. Done pretending she didn't see the flaws in Victoria's logic, the opportunities she was missing, the brilliance she was discarding because it didn't come wrapped in the right package. "No," she said, and the word seemed to surprise her as much as anyone else. "I won't sit down. Because you're wrong, and someone needs to tell you that." Victoria stood slowly, her chair rolling back with deliberate precision. "I'm sorry. What did you just say to me?" "I said you're wrong." Zara's voice was growing stronger, fed by years of suppressed frustration. "You're wrong about the timeline, wrong about the market, wrong about the ROI projections. But most of all, you're wrong about thinking you're the only smart person in this room." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Victoria's eyes were ice, her voice deadly calm. "Miss Okafor, I think you've forgotten your place." "My place?" Zara laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean my place as the invisible assistant who's supposed to nod and smile while you dismiss innovations that could change the world? My place as the woman who's supposed to be grateful for the privilege of watching you tear down brilliant people because their ideas threaten your ego." "That's enough," Victoria snapped, but Zara was just getting started. "Is it? Because I've been watching you for 3 years, Victoria. 3 years of seeing you dismiss ideas because they didn't originate in your head. 3 years of watching you treat brilliant people like disposable resources. 3 years of being told I should be grateful for the crumbs of recognition you drop when you need someone to work late and clean up your mistakes." Victoria's face was a study in controlled rage. "You're fired." "Good," Zara shot back, her voice rising. "Because I'm tired of pretending I don't see how wrong you are. I'm tired of watching you waste potential because you're too proud to admit someone else might have a better idea. I'm tired of being treated like I'm stupid when I have more degrees than half your board of directors and more innovative ideas than your entire R&D department." The room was electric with tension. Dr. Rodriguez looked like she was watching a car crash in slow motion. Victoria's hands were clenched at her sides, her carefully controlled composure cracking. "You want to know what's wrong with this company?" Zara continued, her voice now carrying the full weight of her suppressed brilliance. "It's not the proposals or the timelines or the market analysis. It's you. It's your need to be the smartest person in every room, your inability to recognize intelligence when it doesn't come with the right pedigree, your assumption that quiet means stupid and obedient means incompetent." She grabbed her notepad, her hands shaking with adrenaline and 3 years of pent-up frustration. "And you want to know what's really wrong? You're so busy protecting your empire that you can't see it's crumbling around you. Your competitors are investing in exactly the kind of innovations you're dismissing. In 5 years, they'll be leading the market while you're still congratulating yourself on your smart decisions." Victoria's voice was deadly quiet. "Are you finished?" Zara looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something she'd never noticed before. Beneath the fury and the wounded pride, there was something else. Fear, maybe. Or recognition. The look of someone who'd been hit with a truth they'd been trying to avoid. "Actually, no," Zara said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I'm not finished. Because the saddest part of all this? You're brilliant, Victoria. Genuinely brilliant. But you're so afraid of being wrong that you can't see when you're being stupid. And right now, dismissing Dr. Rodriguez's proposal isn't just stupid, it's catastrophic." She moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at the room full of stunned faces. "Nothing is wrong with me," she said, her voice carrying the weight of every time she'd been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated. "I'm not the problem here. I never was." And with that, she walked out, leaving behind a silence so profound it seemed to echo in the corners of the room. Victoria stood frozen, her carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. In 27 years of business, no one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen through her so completely, challenged her so directly, or made her feel so exposed. But more than that, no one had ever been so completely, devastatingly right. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation or the unprecedented disrespect. The worst part was the growing realization that everything Zara had said was true. Every criticism, every accusation, Every devastating observation had found its mark because Victoria had been thinking the same things herself, pushing down the same doubts, ignoring the same warning signs. She looked at Dr. Rodriguez, who was still staring at the door where Zara had disappeared, and saw something that made her chest tighten. It was respect. The kind of respect Victoria had spent her entire career trying to earn, handed freely to the assistant who'd just destroyed her authority in front of her team. "The meeting is adjourned," Victoria said quietly, her voice barely recognizable. As the team filed out in uncomfortable silence, Victoria remained standing at the head of the table, staring at the chair where Zara had been sitting. For the first time in years, she felt truly alone. Not the splendid isolation of success, but the crushing loneliness of someone who'd built walls so high they couldn't see over them anymore. And somewhere in the elevator shaft, Zara was discovering that standing up for yourself felt nothing like she'd imagined. It didn't feel triumphant or empowering. It felt terrifying and exhilarating and completely irreversible. She'd just declared war on the most powerful woman she'd ever met. What she didn't know was that she'd also just cracked the first foundation stone in walls that had been 20 years in the building. The elevator descended through 42 floors of stunned silence, each floor marking another second of Zara's life irrevocably changed. Her reflection in the polished steel doors showed a woman she barely recognized, eyes blazing with the aftermath of adrenaline, shoulders squared with defiance, hands still trembling with the shock of her own audacity. What have I done? The thought hit her like a physical blow as the elevator opened into the marble-clad lobby of Chen Dynamics Tower. The security guard nodded at her with the same professional courtesy he'd shown for 3 years, unaware that the woman walking past him had just committed career suicide in the most spectacular way possible. Outside, Manhattan hit her like a slap of reality. The March wind whipped through the concrete canyons, carrying the scent of exhaust and ambition, the same mixture that had intoxicated her when she'd first arrived from Queens with nothing but dreams and determination. Now it felt like mockery. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "How's work today, my brilliant daughter?" Zara stared at the message, her vision blurring. How could she explain that she'd just thrown away everything they'd sacrificed for? The late nights her mother had spent cleaning office buildings to pay for her education, the pride in her father's eyes when she'd graduated summa cum laude from Columbia, the way her grandmother had pressed her weathered hands to Zara's cheeks and whispered prayers in Amharic the day she'd gotten the job at Chen Dynamics. She couldn't go home. Not yet. Not with failure still raw on her skin. Instead, she found herself walking toward Bryant Park, muscle memory guiding her to the bench where she'd eaten countless lunches while dreaming of the day she'd finally be seen, finally be heard, finally be valued for the mind that had been her companion through every struggle and triumph. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd finally been heard, all right. She'd been heard destroying her own future in front of 6 witnesses and the most powerful woman in sustainable technology. Her phone rang. Dr. Rodriguez. "Zara." Amanda's voice was gentle, careful. "Where are you?" "Unemployed," Zara said, surprised by the bitter laugh that escaped her throat. "Sitting in Bryant Park, wondering if I've lost my mind." "You haven't lost your mind. You found your voice." "Same thing, apparently." Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what she'd done settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. "God, Amanda, what was I thinking? I couldn't watch her tear you down like that. Your proposal was brilliant, and she was treating it like garbage because it didn't fit her narrow vision of what innovation should look like." "Zara," Amanda said quietly, "in 15 years of corporate presentations, no one has ever stood up for my team like that. No one has ever seen our work the way you described it. How did you even know about the cross-referencing algorithms?" "I read. I research. I think." Zara's voice was hollow. "Apparently, those are firing offenses when you're supposed to be invisible. You're not invisible anymore." No, she wasn't. The question was whether visibility was worth the price she'd just paid. Underscore 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 underscore. 42 floors above, Victoria Chen stood in her office like a statue carved from ice and fury. The meeting had ended an hour ago, but she hadn't moved from her position at the head of the conference table, staring at the chair where her assistant, her former assistant, had systematically dismantled everything she'd built her identity on. The worst part wasn't the public humiliation, though that burned like acid in her throat. The worst part wasn't the unprecedented disrespect, though that made her hands shake with rage. The worst part was the growing certainty that Zara had been right about everything. Her phone buzzed with messages from board members who'd heard about the incident, competitors who smelled blood in the water, journalists who'd caught wind of drama at the usually impenetrable Chen dynamics. But Victoria ignored them all, lost in the echo of words that had stripped her bare in front of her team. You're so afraid of being wrong that you can't see when you're being stupid. The accusation hit deeper than any criticism she'd faced in her meteoric rise to power. Because it was true. She'd built her empire on the foundation of never being wrong, never showing weakness, never admitting that someone else might have a better idea. But somewhere along the way, that foundation had become a prison. She thought about Dr. Rodriguez's proposal, the one she'd dismissed with such casual brutality. If she was honest, and honesty felt like swallowing glass, she dismissed it because it was too good, too revolutionary, too threatening to the carefully controlled narrative of Chen Dynamics' technological superiority. A knock at her door interrupted her spiral. "Come in," she called, her voice sharp enough to cut diamond. Her head of security entered, looking uncomfortable. "Ms. Chen, there's been some chatter on social media. Someone live-tweeted parts of the meeting. Hashtag #ChimaDynamics is trending." Victoria's blood went cold. "What parts?" "The confrontation. Specifically, the part where your assistant called you out on dismissing the sustainability proposal. The tech blogs are picking it up. Millionaire CEO silences innovation is the current headline on TechCrunch." She closed her eyes, feeling the walls of her carefully constructed world beginning to crumble. In the social media age, perception was reality, and the perception was that Victoria Chen had just revealed herself to be exactly the kind of out-of-touch executive that Silicon Valley loved to crucify. "Handle it," she said quietly. "Ma'am, with respect, this might be beyond our usual damage control. The sustainability community is rallying around Dr. Rodriguez's team. They're calling for transparency about the proposal that was dismissed." Victoria's jaw tightened. "I said handle it." After he left, she stood alone in her office, watching the sun set over the Manhattan skyline that had once felt like her kingdom. Now it felt like a monument to her isolation, beautiful and untouchable and completely hollow. She thought about calling her mother, but what would she say? That the empire she'd built to honor her family's sacrifices was crumbling because she'd been too proud to listen to the brilliant woman who'd been sitting 3 feet away from her for 3 years? She thought about calling her therapist, but she'd stopped those sessions years ago, convinced that successful people didn't need emotional support. She thought about calling anyone who might understand, but realized with a shock that she had no one. Her success had cost her everything that mattered, and she was only now beginning to understand the true price. Instead, she did what she always did when the world felt too complicated. She buried herself in work, pulling up financial reports and market analyses, surrounding herself with the cold comfort of numbers that never disappointed her, never challenged her, never made her feel small. But for the first time in her career, the numbers felt hollow. They told her about profit margins and growth projections, but they couldn't tell her why a 26-year-old assistant from Queens had seen flaws in her logic that she'd been blind to. They couldn't tell her why the respect she'd spent decades earning had been transferred to someone else in a single moment of devastating honesty. Most of all, they couldn't tell her why she felt more alone than she had since she was a scared immigrant girl in a Queens apartment, dreaming of a future that felt impossible and necessary in equal measure. Underscore 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 underscore. At 11:47 p.m., Zara finally made it home to her studio apartment in Jackson Heights. The building was quiet, filled with the dreams of people who worked hard and slept deep, who hadn't spent their day burning bridges they couldn't afford to lose. Her grandmother's picture smiled at her from the small altar in the corner. The woman who'd survived war and displacement, who'd raised 7 children on determination and prayer, who'd always told Zara that her mind was a gift from God that should never be hidden. "I don't know if you'd be proud of me tonight, grandmother," she whispered to the photograph. "I stood up for myself, but I might have destroyed everything we worked for." She sat on her bed, laptop open, staring at the job search websites that suddenly felt like lifelines. But every posting seemed to require references, and she'd just made her most important reference her most powerful enemy. Her phone buzzed. An email from an address she didn't recognize. DRAM Rodriguez at chimedynamics.com. "Zara, I know this is irregular, but I wanted you to know that what you did today was the bravest thing I've witnessed in my career. You saw our work, really saw it, in a way that most people never do. You understood the implications, the possibilities, the beauty of what we're trying to create. I don't know what happens next, but I know the world needs more people like you. People who are willing to speak truth to power, who can see beyond the limitations others impose. If you ever want to talk about sustainable technology, innovation, or just need someone who understands what it feels like to be underestimated, I'm here. With admiration and respect, Amanda." Zara stared at the email, feeling something shift in her chest. For the first time since she'd walked out of that conference room, she didn't feel completely alone. Someone had seen her, not just her defiance, but her intelligence, her passion, her potential. Maybe that was worth everything she'd lost. Maybe it was worth everything she was about to discover. Have you ever had a moment where you had to choose between staying safe and speaking your truth? What do you think Zara should do next? Fight for her vindication or start over somewhere new? Drop your thoughts below. The emergency happened at 6:23 a.m., 3 days after the confrontation that had split Zara's life into before and after. She was in Ahmed's bodega, nursing her 3rd cup of coffee in 2 hours and pretending to read job listings on her phone while actually spiraling through worst-case scenarios when her phone exploded with notifications. Breaking: massive data breach at Chen Dynamics. Customer information compromised. Stock plummeting. Urgent: cyber attack on sustainable tech companies. Chen Dynamics, Green Tech Solutions, and Eco-Innovate all hit simultaneously. Developing: sources suggest coordinated attack targeting companies with carbon capture technology. Zara's coffee went cold in her hands as she scrolled through the headlines. This wasn't just bad luck, this was warfare. Someone had specifically targeted companies working on the exact technology Victoria had dismissed 3 days ago. Her phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen made her stomach drop. "Don't hang up," Victoria's voice was sharp, desperate. "I need you." "You fired me," Zara said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I know what I did, and I know what I said, but right now I need your help. We've been hit by a coordinated cyber attack, and it's specifically targeting our sustainable technology research. They got into our servers, Zara. They have everything." Through the bodega window, Zara could see the Manhattan skyline, the glass towers where Victoria's empire was probably crumbling in real time. "Why are you calling me?" "Because you're the only person who understood what we were really working on. You saw the connections between the proposals, the bigger picture. The FBI is involved now, and they need someone who can explain the significance of what was stolen." The FBI. Industrial espionage. Whoever did this knew exactly what to look for. They bypassed our main servers and went straight for the R&D files. The sustainable technology proposals. The carbon capture algorithms. Everything Dr. Rodriguez's team developed. Zara felt her analytical mind kicking in despite herself. That's not random. Someone knew the value of that specific research. Exactly. And right now, you're the only person who can help us figure out who and why. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "I'm asking you to come back. Not as my assistant. As a consultant. Help us understand what we're really dealing with." "Victoria, please." The word seemed to tear something inside Victoria's throat. "I'm sitting in a room full of FBI agents and cybersecurity experts, and none of them understand what was really taken. They see code and algorithms. You saw the future." Zara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of decision. Every rational thought screamed at her to hang up, to let Victoria deal with the consequences of her own arrogance. But there was something else, something that had been nagging at her since she'd read the headlines. The other companies that were hit, she said slowly. Green Tech and Eco-Innovate. They were both working on carbon capture technology. How did you? I read everything, Victoria. I've been following developments in sustainable technology for years. If someone specifically targeted those three companies, they weren't after money or random corporate secrets. They were after the research that could revolutionize clean energy. Silence on the other end of the line. The question is, Zara continued, who benefits from that research being stolen or destroyed? Who profits from keeping carbon capture technology out of the market? Will you help us figure that out? Zara looked at her reflection in the bodega window, unemployed, uncertain, but still brilliant. Still capable of seeing patterns others missed. I'll be there in an hour. Underscore 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 underscore. The 42nd floor of Chen Dynamics had been transformed into a war room. FBI agents in crisp suits clustered around laptops. Cybersecurity specialists traced digital footprints across multiple monitors. And in the center of it all, Victoria Chen looked like a general whose army had just been decimated. She was still beautiful, still commanding, but there was something different in her posture. The absolute certainty that had defined her for 3 years was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. Agent Martinez, Victoria said as Zara entered the conference room. This is Zara Okafor, our technology consultant. Agent Martinez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, extended her hand. Ms. Okafor, we understand you have particular insight into the stolen research. Zara shook her hand, hyper-aware of Victoria's eyes on her. I've been following developments in sustainable technology. The companies that were hit represent 3 different approaches to carbon capture. Taken together, their research could create a comprehensive solution to industrial carbon emissions. Comprehensive how? Agent Martinez asked. Imagine you could capture carbon from manufacturing, convert it to renewable energy, and store the excess in a way that actually improves soil quality. That's what you get when you combine Chen Dynamics' energy conversion algorithms with Green Tech as capture technology and Eco-Innovate's storage solutions. Victoria's head snapped up. You saw that connection? I see a lot of connections you don't, Zara said quietly, then turned back to Agent Martinez. The question is, who would want to stop that technology from reaching the market? Or steal it for themselves, Agent Martinez added. For the next 4 hours, Zara found herself in the strange position of working alongside the woman who had fired her, their minds operating in parallel to trace the digital breadcrumbs left by the attackers. Victoria's business acumen combined with Zara's technical insight created a formidable analytical team, even as the tension between them crackled like electricity. Look at the timing, Zara said, pointing to a timeline on the whiteboard. All 3 attacks happened within a 6-hour window, but they weren't simultaneous. Someone wanted to create chaos, not just steal data. Victoria studied the timeline. If the goal was pure theft, they would have hit all 3 companies at once, grabbed what they needed and disappeared. This pattern suggests sabotage, Zara finished. Someone wants to destroy confidence in sustainable technology research, make companies afraid to invest in it. Agent Martinez leaned forward. Who benefits from that? Traditional energy companies, Victoria said slowly. Fossil fuel conglomerates who see carbon capture as an existential threat. Or, Zara added, someone who wants to corner the market on clean energy solutions. Steal the research, let the companies collapse, then buy up the assets for pennies on the dollar. As the day wore on, Zara found herself forgetting about their history, about the humiliation and anger of 3 days ago. There was something intoxicating about working with someone who could keep up with her thinking, who could build on her ideas rather than dismiss them. Victoria, meanwhile, was discovering what it felt like to work with someone who saw her ideas as starting points rather than gospel. For the first time in years, she felt like she was collaborating rather than commanding. The IP theft pattern suggests someone with inside knowledge, Zara said during their 5th hour of analysis. These weren't random hackers. Someone knew exactly where to look. Someone who understood the value of what we were building, Victoria agreed. Their eyes met across the conference table, and for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hung between them. The apology Victoria hadn't given. The vindication Zara hadn't received. The acknowledgement that they were both brilliant, both valuable, both necessary. "We make a good team," Victoria said quietly. "We always did," Zara replied. "You just never noticed." Agent Martinez cleared her throat. "If you're right about the inside knowledge, we need to look at everyone who had access to all three companies' research. Cross-reference employees, contractors, board members, and investors," Zara added. "Someone who could have influenced all three companies' security protocols." As evening fell over Manhattan, the war room had become something else entirely. Not just a crisis response center, but a place where two brilliant women had finally found themselves working as equals, their minds complementing each other in ways that felt both natural and revolutionary. Neither of them wanted to admit it, but the crisis had given them something they'd both been missing: intellectual intimacy, the rare gift of being truly seen and understood by someone who could match their intensity. The attack on their companies had forced them together, but what was growing between them was something entirely different. Something that might survive long after the crisis was over. The crisis had stretched into their third 18-hour day. The conference room on the 42nd floor had become their war room, littered with coffee cups, takeout containers, and whiteboards covered in Zara's precise handwriting. Victoria's usual immaculate appearance had given way to rolled sleeves and loosened hair, while Zara had shed her nervous fidgeting for focused intensity. They were debugging the catastrophic failure in Victoria's flagship AI platform. A failure that threatened to bankrupt the company and destroy everything Victoria had built. But somewhere between lines of code and strategic pivots, the walls between them had begun to crack. "Your algorithm," Victoria said, studying Zara's latest solution on the screen. "It's not just elegant. It's familiar somehow." Zara's fingers hesitated over the keyboard. "What do you mean?" "The logic pattern. The way you approach problems." Victoria's voice carried an odd note, almost vulnerable. "My father used to think like this." The admission hung in the air between them. Chen never mentioned her father. In 5 years of working for her, Zara had never heard her reference family at all. "Your father was a programmer?" Zara asked carefully. Victoria laughed, but it was hollow. "He was a janitor. At Stanford. Night shift." She moved to the window, her reflection ghost-like against the darkening sky. "He'd bring me with him sometimes when my mother was working double shifts at the restaurant. I'd do my homework in empty classrooms while he cleaned. But afterward," her voice softened, "he'd sit with me and explain the equations still on the whiteboards. Physics, computer science, engineering. He understood all of it." Zara stopped typing entirely. "He taught you. Everything I know about thinking, about problem-solving, it came from him. A man who cleaned toilets for Stanford students who probably never saw him as human." Victoria's hand pressed against the glass. "He died when I was 16. Heart attack. Too many years of working 3 jobs to pay for my education." The weight of revelation settled between them. Zara felt her own chest tighten with recognition. "My mother sold injera on street corners," Zara said quietly. "In Addis Ababa, then in Queens. She'd wake up at 3 a.m. to prepare the batter, walk miles to get the best teff flour." She joined Victoria at the window, their reflections now side by side. "She's the smartest person I know. Speaks 4 languages, can calculate currency exchanges in her head faster than a computer. But here, she's just the woman with the cart." "When did you know you were different?" Victoria asked. "When I was 7. I taught myself to read in English by studying the technical manuals my uncle threw away. He worked maintenance at IBM." Zara's voice carried the weight of old shame. "My mother found me one day, reading a programming guide like it was a storybook." She cried. Not because she was proud, because she was scared. Scared of what? That I'd forget where I came from. That I'd become someone who looked at her the way others looked at her. Zara's reflection wavered. "She made me promise to never let anyone make me feel small for being smart, but also to never let being smart make me feel bigger than where I came from." Victoria turned from the window. "And I made you feel small. It wasn't a question. The truth of it sat between them like a living thing. You made me feel invisible, Zara said. Like my mind didn't matter. Like I was just decorative. I know what it's like, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. To have everyone assume you're less than you are. To have to prove your worth every single day. I thought. She stopped, struggling. I thought if I got high enough, powerful enough, I'd never have to feel that way again. But you did it to me. Yes. The word came out broken. I did to you what Stanford students did to my father. What venture capitalists did to me when I was starting out. What my own board tried to do last month. Victoria's control was fracturing. I became the thing I hated most. Zara felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness. Not yet, but understanding. Why are you telling me this? Victoria looked directly at her for the first time in days. Because watching you work these past 3 days, seeing your mind, really seeing it, it's like watching my father again. The way you think, the way you solve problems, it's brilliant. And I almost destroyed it. You didn't destroy anything, Zara said firmly. You just buried it. Can it be unburied? The question carried more weight than just code and algorithms. Zara studied Victoria's face, the exhaustion, the vulnerability, the genuine regret. This wasn't the Ice Queen who had dismissed her for years. This was someone else entirely. My mother used to say that the earth always remembers what's planted in it, Zara said, even when the surface looks barren. Victoria's eyes glistened. I want to remember how to see people. Really see them. The way my father saw those equations on the whiteboard, not as obstacles, but as possibilities. Then start with me, Zara said. Really see me. Victoria looked at her, not through her, not past her, but at her. At the woman who had just spent 3 days solving problems that had stumped teams of experts. At the mind that had been hiding in plain sight for 5 years. I see you, Victoria whispered. And I'm sorry it took me so long. The admission hung between them, fragile and true. Outside, Manhattan glittered with 1,000 lights, each one representing someone fighting to be seen, to be valued, to belong. Inside, 2 women who had traveled impossible distances to reach this moment finally began to understand that their journeys had been preparing them for each other all along. The code on the screen blinked, waiting for their next command. But for the first time in days, neither woman was looking at the monitor. They were looking at each other, seeing clearly at last. 3 days turned into a week. The crisis had evolved from emergency to obsession, but neither woman seemed in any hurry to leave their makeshift sanctuary on the 42nd floor. The cleaning crew had stopped bothering them after the 3rd night. They'd found them asleep on opposite couches, laptops still warm on their chests. Hand me that marker, Zara said, not looking away from the whiteboard where she was mapping out data structures. Victoria complied without question, their fingers brushing as she passed it over. Neither acknowledged the spark of contact, but neither pulled away quickly either. Your handwriting, Victoria observed, watching Zara's precise annotations. It's like calligraphy. My mother insisted on it. Said sloppy writing meant sloppy thinking. Zara paused, marker hovering mid-stroke. She made me practice for hours. English letters, Amharic script, even Arabic numerals. She said one day I'd need to write things that mattered. Victoria smiled, a real one, not the practiced corporate expression. She was right. The late hour had stripped away their professional facades. Victoria sat cross-legged on the floor, her designer blazer draped over a chair, working in a silk camisole and pencil skirt. Zara had abandoned her cardigan hours ago, her natural hair free from its usual careful styling. In this space, they weren't boss and employee. They were just 2 minds working in perfect synchronization. I've been thinking about what you said, Zara said, turning from the board. About your father. Victoria's hands stilled on her keyboard. What about it? The way you described him seeing those equations, not as obstacles but as possibilities. Zara settled onto the floor beside her, closer than propriety would usually allow. That's how you've been looking at our code all week. Like it's full of potential instead of problems. Maybe that's because I'm not looking at it alone anymore. The admission was soft, almost lost in the hum of the building's ventilation system. Victoria's fingers found the edge of a printout, worrying the paper between her thumb and forefinger. I haven't collaborated with anyone in years, she continued. Not really. I give orders, people execute them. But this, what we're doing. She gestured at the organized chaos surrounding them. I'd forgotten how it feels to think alongside someone else. It feels like coming home, Zara said quietly. Victoria's eyes snapped to hers. Yes, exactly like that. The moment stretched between them, charged with recognition. Zara felt her pulse quicken, not from caffeine or deadline pressure, but from something deeper. The way Victoria looked at her now, like she was seeing not just her mind, but her soul. I need to show you something, Victoria said suddenly. She moved to her laptop, pulling up a file Zara had never seen. I've been working on this for months. A project I couldn't trust to anyone else. The screen filled with elegant code, not the utilitarian programming of their current crisis, but something that looked almost artistic. Zara leaned closer, her shoulder brushing Victoria's as she studied the logic. It's beautiful, she breathed. What does it do? It's a translation algorithm. Not just language, concepts, cultural context, emotional nuance. Victoria's voice carried a vulnerability Zara had never heard before. I wanted to build something that could bridge the gap between minds that think differently, that could help people understand each other across every kind of divide. Zara's heart clenched. Victoria, I know it's naive, idealistic, nothing like the practical applications that make money. Victoria's fingers hovered over the keyboard. But I kept thinking about my father, trying to explain quantum physics to a 10-year-old in broken English. About my mother, brilliant with numbers, but stumbling over idioms. About all the ways we fail to really hear each other. It's not naive, Zara said firmly. It's necessary. She reached over, her hand covering Victoria's on the trackpad. May I? Victoria nodded, and Zara began to scroll through the code, her excitement building with each line. This section here, you're trying to map emotional resonance, but you're approaching it linearly. Zara's free hand moved to the keyboard, typing with quick, sure strokes. What if we treated it like a musical chord instead? Multiple emotional notes playing simultaneously. Victoria watched, mesmerized, as Zara's modifications transformed the rigid structure into something fluid and alive. How did you see that? Because I've lived it. Every day, switching between languages, between cultures, between the person I am at home and the person I have to be here. Zara's fingers never stopped moving. Your algorithm is trying to be a bridge. But bridges aren't straight lines, they're curves, arcs. They bend so they don't break. Show me, Victoria whispered. For the next hour, they worked in perfect harmony. Zara's modifications flowed seamlessly into Victoria's framework, each enhancement building on the last. Their heads bent close together, breath mingling, hands occasionally touching as they reached for the same keys. There, Zara said finally, hitting enter. Try it now. Victoria input a test phrase, something complex and multi-layered. The algorithm processed it, returning not just a translation, but a web of cultural context, emotional subtext, and alternative interpretations. It's alive, Victoria said, wonder in her voice. It's actually thinking. We're thinking, Zara corrected. Together. Victoria turned to face her, and Zara was struck by how close they were sitting. Close enough to count the flecks of gold in Victoria's dark eyes. Close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her skin. I've never. Victoria started, then stopped. I've never had a partner. In work, in thinking, in anything that mattered. Neither have I, Zara admitted. I didn't know I was missing it until now. The confession hung between them, intimate and honest. Victoria's hand found Zara's cheek, fingertips tracing the soft curve of her face. Zara, she said, and the name sounded different in her voice now. Not like a command or a dismissal, but like a prayer. I know, Zara whispered, leaning into the touch. I feel it too. They stayed like that, foreheads almost touching, breathing the same air. The city hummed around them, but in this moment, they were the only two people in the world who mattered. I don't want this to end, Victoria said. Then don't let it, Zara replied. But even as she spoke, she felt the weight of reality pressing against their bubble. Outside this room, Victoria was still her boss. Still the woman who had dismissed her for years. Still the person who held all the power. The doubt must have shown on her face, because Victoria's hand tightened against her cheek. I know what you're thinking, Victoria said. About power, about consequences. About what happens when we leave this room. What happens? Zara asked. I don't know, Victoria admitted. But I know I can't go back to seeing you as anything less than you are. I won't survive it. Neither will I, Zara said. They sat there in the glow of the computer screen, two women who had found something neither had been looking for. The code they'd written together pulsed with life, a digital bridge between minds that had learned to see each other clearly. Outside, dawn was breaking over Manhattan. But inside their sanctuary, time felt suspended, holding this moment of perfect understanding before the world could intrude again. The intrusion came at 9:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, in the form of Marcus Webb, Victoria's head of operations, bursting through the conference room doors with a tablet in one hand and barely contained panic in his eyes. Victoria, we need to talk. Now. The spell broke instantly. Victoria straightened, her corporate mask sliding back into place with practiced ease. Zara felt the shift like a physical blow, the warmth draining from Victoria's expression, the distance reasserting itself between them. What is it, Marcus? Victoria's voice was crisp, professional. The woman who had whispered Zara's name like a prayer just hours before had vanished. The board called an emergency meeting. They're voting on your leadership. Today. Marcus's eyes flickered to Zara, then back to Victoria. Someone leaked the extent of the crisis. They know how bad it really was. Victoria's face went pale. Who? We don't know yet. But Victoria. Marcus hesitated, his gaze landing on Zara again. They're also asking questions about your working methods. About why you've been holed up in here for a week with just your assistant. The words hit like a slap. Zara felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. Just your assistant. As if the past week had meant nothing. As if her contributions were invisible again. I see, Victoria said, her voice ice cold. And what exactly are they implying? They're wondering if you've lost your objectivity. If you're making decisions based on personal feelings rather than business judgment. Marcus's discomfort was palpable. Richard Caldwell is leading the charge. He's been wanting your position for months. Zara watched Victoria's face transform, walls slamming down so fast it left her breathless. This was survival mode, the same ruthless calculation that had built Victoria's empire. Call an all-hands meeting, Victoria said, standing abruptly. I want every department head in the main conference room in 30 minutes. We're going to show them exactly what we've accomplished. Victoria, Zara said quietly, rising as well. We should talk about. Ms. Okafor, Victoria cut her off, not even looking at her. Please prepare a presentation of your technical contributions. Keep it brief and factual. No editorializing. The formal tone, the sudden distance, the way Victoria wouldn't meet her eyes. It was like being doused with ice water. Zara felt something crack inside her chest. Of course, Miss Chen, she managed, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. As Marcus rushed out to make arrangements, Zara found herself alone with Victoria for the first time since the interruption. The woman across from her was a stranger, polished, controlled, unreachable. Victoria, Zara tried again, stepping closer. What we built this week. What we built, Victoria said, finally looking at her, was a solution to a business problem. Nothing more. The words landed like physical blows. Zara recoiled as if slapped. That's not true, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Last night, when you showed me your algorithm, Last night was a mistake, Victoria said, her voice cutting and precise. I was exhausted, not thinking clearly. I let the pressure of the situation cloud my judgment. Your judgment. Zara's voice cracked. Is that what you call it? What'd you call me? Victoria's mask flickered for just a moment, a flash of pain, of regret, but it was gone so quickly Zara wondered if she'd imagined it. I call it what it is, Victoria said. A professional collaboration that became temporarily complicated. Complicated. Zara repeated the word like it tasted bitter. That's what I am to you. A complication. You're my employee, Victoria said with devastating finality. That's all you've ever been. The lie hung between them, poisonous and deliberate. Zara felt 5 years of accumulated hurt crash over her, multiplied by the hope of the past week, the intimacy they'd shared, the vulnerability Victoria had shown her. I don't believe you, Zara said, her voice strengthening with anger. I saw you. The real you. You can't just pretend that didn't happen. I'm not pretending anything, Victoria replied, turning away to gather her papers. I'm being realistic. I have a company to save and a board to face. I can't afford distractions. Distractions. The word came out as a sob. Is that what my mind is to you? What my work is? What I am? Victoria's shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. Your work is excellent. Your mind is sharp. But this, she gestured between them, this was never real. Liar, Zara said, her voice breaking. You're lying to protect yourself. You're scared they'll take away your power, so you're throwing me away like I'm nothing. I'm not throwing you away, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm maintaining appropriate professional boundaries. Appropriate? Zara laughed bitterly. There was nothing appropriate about the way you looked at me last night. Nothing appropriate about the way you touched my face, the way you said my name. Victoria flinched as if struck. I was vulnerable. I made a mistake. I was the mistake. Zara's voice rose, all pretense of control abandoned. Seeing me as human was a mistake. Recognizing my intelligence was a mistake. Letting yourself feel something real for once in your life was a mistake. Yes. Victoria whirled around, her own control finally cracking. Yes, it was a mistake. Because this is what happens. People get close, they get hurt, they become liabilities. I can't afford liabilities. So you'd rather be alone, Zara said, tears streaming down her face. You'd rather be miserable and powerful than happy and vulnerable. I'd rather be alone than destroyed, Victoria shot back. And if you can't understand that, then you don't understand me at all. I understand you perfectly, Zara said, her voice going dangerously quiet. You're exactly what I thought you were 5 years ago. A coward who uses success to hide from anything real. Victoria's face went white. Get out. What? Get out of my conference room. Get out of my sight. I never want to see you again. The words hit like a physical blow. Zara staggered backward, her hand reaching for the door frame for support. Fine, she whispered. But know this, when you're sitting alone in your tower, remember that you chose this. You chose fear over love, power over connection, control over trust. And you'll have exactly what you deserve. Nothing. She turned and walked out, leaving Victoria standing alone among the whiteboards covered with their collaborative work, the coffee cups that had sustained their late-night sessions, the laptops that still held their merged code. Outside in the hallway, Zara collapsed against the wall, her whole body shaking. She had given Victoria everything, her mind, her heart, her hope, and it had all been thrown back in her face. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and typed a simple message to HR. I resign, effective immediately. Then she walked to the elevator, stepped inside, and watched the numbers count down as she descended from the 42nd floor for the last time. Behind her, she left not just a job, but the woman who had shown her what it felt like to be truly seen, truly valued, truly loved, and then snatched it all away with surgical precision. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby, and Zara walked out into the morning sunlight, leaving Victoria Chen alone with her empire and her fear, exactly as she'd chosen to be. Victoria stood in the empty conference room for exactly 93 seconds after Zara left. She counted them, focusing on the precise tick of the wall clock to keep from thinking about the way Zara's voice had broken on the word nothing. Then she gathered her papers, straightened her blazer, and walked to the boardroom to fight for her life. The presentation was flawless. Victoria displayed the solution with clinical precision, walking the board through every technical breakthrough, every innovative approach, every line of code that had saved the company. She spoke for 47 minutes without once mentioning Zara's name. Impressive work, Victoria, Richard Caldwell said when she finished, his tone suggesting anything but approval. Tell me, who else was involved in developing this solution? My team worked around the clock, Victoria replied smoothly. It was a collaborative effort. Your team, Caldwell repeated. I was told you spent the entire week locked in a conference room with just your assistant. That seems unusual. Victoria's jaw tightened imperceptibly. I worked with whoever was available and capable. And this assistant, what was her role exactly? The question hung in the air like a trap. Victoria could feel every eye in the room on her waiting. She thought of Zara's elegant algorithm modifications, her brilliant insights, the way she'd seen solutions that had eluded teams of experts. Minimal, Victoria said. Mostly administrative support. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Across the table, board member Sarah Kim raised an eyebrow. Sarah had been one of the few women to support Victoria's rise to power, and her skeptical expression cut deeper than Caldwell's obvious hostility. I see, Caldwell said. Well, regardless of the personnel involved, the question remains whether this crisis reflects a failure of leadership. Whether someone so isolated, so unwilling to delegate or trust others, can effectively run a company of this size. My results speak for themselves, Victoria said. Do they? Caldwell opened his tablet, swiping to a prepared presentation. Because I've been looking at your management style, Victoria. High turnover, especially among talented women. Complaints about a hostile work environment. A pattern of dismissing valuable contributions from subordinates. Victoria felt the walls closing in. I hold people to high standards. You hold people at arm's length, Sarah Kim interjected, her voice cutting through the room's tension. When was the last time you promoted someone from within? When was the last time you recognized someone else's innovation publicly? I don't operate on sentiment, Victoria said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. No, Sarah agreed. You operate on fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being vulnerable, fear of admitting you might need other people. She leaned forward. It's made you brilliant, Victoria, but it's also made you brittle. The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria saw Zara's face, heard her voice. You'd rather be alone than destroyed. I move to table the leadership question, Caldwell said, until we can conduct a more thorough review of recent events. Seconded, came a voice from the end of the table. Victoria watched her empire fracture in real time. Everything she'd built, everything she'd sacrificed for, slipping through her fingers because she'd been too afraid to admit she needed help. Too afraid to admit she needed Zara. The meeting ended with Victoria's authority, suspended pending further review. She walked back to her office in a daze, her mind replaying every moment of the past week. Every brilliant insight Zara had offered. Every time she'd made Victoria's work better, stronger, more innovative. Her laptop still contained their merged code, the translation algorithm that had come alive under Zara's touch. Victoria opened it now, scrolling through the elegant logic, the beautiful architecture of two minds working as one. At the bottom of the file, she found a comment she'd missed before. // VCs plus Zio, building bridges that bend so they don't break Zio. Zara had signed their work, had claimed her contribution with quiet pride, and Victoria had erased her from the presentation completely. She picked up her phone 3 times before finally dialing. It went straight to voicemail. Zara, it's me. I need to talk to you. Please call me back. Silence. Victoria left her office and drove to Queens, to the address she'd pulled from Zara's employee file. The neighborhood was nothing like Manhattan. Tree-lined streets, small apartments, the smell of cooking spices drifting from open windows. She found the building, climbed 3 flights of stairs, and knocked on apartment 3B. An older Ethiopian woman answered, her face guarded. Yes, I'm looking for Zara. I'm her. I work with her. The woman's expression hardened. She's not here. Could you tell me where? She's not here, the woman repeated, starting to close the door. And you're not welcome here. Wait, Victoria said desperately. Please. I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. I need to tell her. You need to tell her what? The woman's voice was sharp as a blade. That you're sorry? That you didn't mean to humiliate her? That you didn't mean to throw away her work like it was nothing? Victoria's heart sank. She told you. She told me she found someone who saw her brilliance. Someone who made her feel valued. Someone who made her believe in herself. The woman's eyes blazed with protective fury. And then she told me how you destroyed that. How you threw her away to save yourself. I was scared, Victoria whispered. I was scared of losing everything. So you chose to lose her instead. The woman shook her head. My daughter is worth 10 of you. She always has been. I only wish she'd never forgotten that. Your daughter. My daughter, the woman said with fierce pride. Who you never deserved. The door closed with finality. Victoria stood in the hallway, staring at the scratched paint and crooked numbers, feeling the weight of her choices crushing down on her. She drove back to Manhattan through blurring tears, past the gleaming towers that had once represented everything she'd wanted. Her phone buzzed with messages from her lawyer, her assistant, her few remaining allies. The corporate machine grinding forward, demanding her attention, her decisions, her life. At a red light, she looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Success had carved lines around her eyes, turned her mouth into a hard line. When had she become so cold? When had she forgotten what it felt like to be human? She thought of her father, working nights at Stanford, explaining equations with infinite patience. He'd taught her to see possibilities, not obstacles. But somewhere along the way, she'd learned to see threats instead. The light turned green. Victoria could turn right, go back to her penthouse, her empire, her lonely throne. Or she could turn left, toward the airport, toward possibility, toward the hardest choice of her life. She sat at the intersection for a long moment, traffic honking around her, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Everything she'd built was behind her. Everything she'd lost was somewhere ahead. Zara's words echoed in her mind. Bridges aren't straight lines, they're curves, arcs. They bend so they don't break. Victoria had spent her life building walls. Maybe it was time to learn how to build bridges instead. She turned left. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles away, Zara sat on a bench overlooking the San Francisco Bay, her laptop open, code flowing across the screen. She'd taken a job with a small startup, a fraction of the pay, none of the prestige, but a team that valued her contributions. That saw her. Her phone buzzed. Another voicemail from Victoria. She deleted it without listening, just like she'd deleted the previous 7. Some bridges, once burned, couldn't be rebuilt. But as she watched the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and possibility, she found herself thinking about algorithms and equations, about two minds working as one, about the feeling of being truly understood. She thought about bridges that bent so they didn't break. And for the first time in 3 weeks, she didn't immediately push the memory away. The conference was called Bridging Minds, AI and Human Connection, and Zara had only agreed to speak because her new team had insisted. "You're brilliant," her colleague Maya had said. "The world needs to hear your ideas." Standing backstage at the San Francisco Convention Center, Zara felt the familiar flutter of nerves she'd thought she'd left behind in New York. "Our next speaker," the moderator announced, "is Dr. Zara Okafor, lead developer of the revolutionary empathy algorithm that's changing how we think about human-AI interaction." Zara walked onto the stage, her confidence growing with each step. The algorithm she'd built, expanded from the foundation she and Victoria had created together, was making waves in the tech world. She'd finally found her voice, her platform, her recognition. "Good morning," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I want to talk to you about bridges. Not the kind that span rivers or valleys, but the kind that span minds. The kind that help us understand each other across every divide that separates us." She clicked to her first slide, showing the elegant architecture of her algorithm. This system doesn't just translate words. It translates meaning, context, emotional resonance. It helps us see that intelligence comes in many forms, that brilliance can be hidden in plain sight, and that the most powerful innovations happen when minds truly connect. In the audience, scattered throughout the darkness beyond the stage lights, people leaned forward. Zara felt their attention like a physical force, their engagement with her ideas. This was what she'd dreamed of, not just being seen, but being heard, valued, respected for her mind. "The breakthrough came," she continued, "when I realized that connection isn't about similarity. It's about recognition. It's about seeing the spark in someone else's thinking and allowing it to illuminate your own." She was deep into her presentation, explaining the algorithm's emotional mapping capabilities, when movement in the back of the auditorium caught her eye. A familiar silhouette in the doorway, backlit by the lobby lights. "Victoria." Zara's voice almost faltered, but she pressed on, years of hiding her brilliance having taught her to perform under pressure. Victoria slipped into an empty seat in the last row. Her presence like a gravitational pull Zara had to actively resist. "The most important lesson," Zara said, her eyes finding Victoria's across the crowded room, "is that we must be willing to be vulnerable, to let ourselves be seen, truly seen, by another mind. Because only in that vulnerability can we find genuine connection." She finished her presentation to thunderous applause. The Q&A session blurred past, her answers automatic while her mind raced. Victoria was here. After 2 months of silence, she was here. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Zara found herself alone on the stage, gathering her materials with trembling hands. Footsteps echoed in the emptying auditorium, and she didn't need to look up to know who was approaching. "Hello, Zara." Victoria's voice was different, softer, uncertain. Zara forced herself to look up, and her breath caught. Victoria looked smaller somehow, more human. Her usual armor of perfect makeup and tailored suits had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair was longer, less controlled. She looked like someone who'd been learning to be vulnerable. "Victoria." Zara's voice was carefully neutral. "I'm surprised to see you here." "I've been following your work," Victoria said, stopping a few feet away. "Your algorithm, it's extraordinary. Better than anything I could have imagined." "Thank you." Zara finished packing her laptop, her movements precise and controlled. "How did you find me?" "I've been looking for you for 2 months. I went to Seattle, Portland, 3 different startups before I found the right one." Victoria's hands were clasped tightly in front of her. "I needed to find you." "Why?" The simple question hung between them. Victoria looked down at her hands, then back up at Zara with something like desperation in her eyes. "Because you were right," she said quietly. "About everything. About me being a coward, about choosing fear over connection, about ending up with exactly what I deserved." "Nothing." Zara felt her careful composure wavering. "Victoria." "I lost everything," Victoria continued. "The board voted me out 3 weeks after you left. Caldwell's running the company now, dismantling everything I built. But you know what the worst part is? I don't care. I don't care about any of it, because I realized that everything I thought I wanted was just a way to avoid the thing I actually needed. Which was you." The word came out broken, honest. "I needed you. Not just your mind, though your mind is extraordinary. I needed you to see me, to challenge me, to make me remember that success without connection is just expensive loneliness." Zara felt tears prick her eyes. "You threw me away." "I know." Victoria's voice cracked. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I was terrified of losing control, of being vulnerable, of admitting that I needed someone else. So I destroyed the most beautiful thing that had ever happened to me." "It was beautiful," Zara whispered, her composure finally cracking. "What we built together, the way we understood each other, it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever experienced." "I'm sorry," Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Zara. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways that can't be undone. But I had to try. I had to tell you that you were never nothing to me. You were everything." Zara stood there, her heart breaking and mending simultaneously. This was the Victoria she'd glimpsed in those late nights at the office, vulnerable, honest, real. The woman who'd shared her father's story, who'd shown her the translation algorithm, who'd looked at her like she was precious. "What do you want from me?" Zara asked. "Nothing," Victoria said immediately. "I want nothing from you. I just needed you to know that you were right, that I chose fear over love, and it destroyed me. But watching you up there, seeing you shine the way you were always meant to, it's worth it. You're free, you're successful, you're valued. You're everything you should have been while I was too blind to see it." "And you?" Zara asked. "What are you doing now?" Victoria smiled, and for the first time it reached her eyes. "I'm teaching computer science at a community college in Brooklyn. A lot of my students are immigrants, first-generation college students. They remind me of my father, of what it means to see possibility instead of obstacles." "You're teaching." "I'm learning to see people," Victoria said. "Really see them. The way you taught me to see you. The way my father taught me to see equations as beautiful instead of intimidating." Zara felt something shift in her chest. "That sounds like you. It's who I want to be. Who I should have been all along." Victoria took a tentative step closer. "I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know I hurt you too deeply, destroyed too much trust. But if there's any part of you that remembers what we had, what we built together." "I remember," Zara said softly. "I remember everything." They stood there in the empty auditorium, 2 women who had traveled impossible distances to reach this moment. Victoria, who had given up everything to learn how to be human. Zara, who had finally claimed her brilliance and found her voice. "I'm not the same person who left New York," Zara said. "I know. You're better, stronger, more yourself than I ever let you be. And you're not the same person who broke my heart. I hope not. I've been trying to become someone worthy of the woman who saw bridges instead of walls." Zara looked at her, really looked at her. Past the hurt and betrayal, past the fear and anger, to the person underneath. The woman who had shared her vulnerabilities, who had let Zara see her father's influence, who had created something beautiful just to help people understand each other. "I built something," Zara said quietly, "based on what we started together. It's bigger now, more complex, but the foundation, the part about bridging minds, that came from us. I saw, in your presentation. It's extraordinary. I could use a collaborator," Zara said carefully. "Someone who understands the theoretical framework, who can see the bigger picture. Someone who knows how to build bridges that bend so they don't break." Victoria's breath caught. "Zara, I'm not offering forgiveness," Zara said quickly. "I'm not offering romance or a relationship or anything like what we had before. I'm offering a chance to build something together. Something that matters. I don't deserve it." "No," Zara agreed. "You don't. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is what we can create together, what we can contribute to the world. Maybe the point is that some bridges are worth rebuilding, even when they've been burned." Victoria looked at her with something like wonder. "You're giving me a chance to earn back your trust. I'm giving you a chance to prove that you've changed, that you can see me, really see me, and value what I bring without trying to control it or diminish it. And if I fail, then you fail," Zara said simply. "But if you succeed, if you can learn to be a true partner, to share credit and recognition, to lift others up instead of standing above them, then maybe we can build something revolutionary." Victoria nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I want to try. I want to be better. I want to be worthy of your brilliance." "Then let's start with this," Zara said, holding out her hand. "Equal partners, equal recognition, equal respect." Victoria took her hand, and the touch sent electricity through both of them. Not the desperate passion of their first connection, but something steadier, more mature. The foundation of something that could last. "Equal partners," Victoria agreed. "The algorithm needs work," Zara said, her scientist's mind already racing ahead. "The emotional mapping is still too rigid. And I've been thinking about your father's approach to problem solving. You remember that?" "I remember everything," Zara said again. "Even the parts that hurt. Especially the parts that mattered." They stood there in the empty auditorium, hands linked, minds already beginning to connect again. Outside, San Francisco sparkled in the afternoon sun, a city built on hills and bridges, on the dreams of people who had traveled far to find their place in the world. "There's something else," Victoria said quietly. "Something I never told you." "What?" "That night, when we were working on the algorithm, when I showed you my father's influence, when you enhanced the code, I fell in love with you. Not just attracted, not just fascinated. I fell completely, irrevocably in love with your mind, your heart, your spirit. And it terrified me so much that I destroyed it." Zara felt her heart stop, then restart with a different rhythm. "Victoria, I know it's too late for that," Victoria said quickly. "I know I killed that possibility. But I needed you to know that what we had was real, that it mattered, that even if we can only be colleagues now, only be partners in work, it was the most real thing I've ever felt." Zara looked at her, seeing the truth in her eyes, the genuine regret and love and hope. She thought about bridges that bent so they didn't break, about algorithms that could map the human heart, about the impossible distance between minds that somehow found each other across every divide. "It's not too late," she said softly. "It's just different. Harder. We'll have to build it from scratch, earn it piece by piece. But maybe that's better. Maybe that's what makes it real." Victoria's smile was like sunrise after the longest night. "I love you, Zara Okafor. Your brilliant mind, your generous heart, your ability to see possibilities where others see obstacles. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of that love." "I love you too," Zara said, and felt the truth of it settle in her bones. "I love the woman you're becoming. The teacher, the bridge builder, the person who chooses vulnerability over control. I love your mind, your heart, your willingness to change. They kissed then, in the empty auditorium, surrounded by the echoes of Zara's presentation about building bridges between minds. It was different from their first kiss, less desperate, more sure. It tasted like possibility and second chances, like algorithms and equations, like the future they would build together. When they broke apart, Zara smiled. Come on, partner. We have work to do. What kind of work? The kind that changes the world, Zara said, taking Victoria's hand. The kind that builds bridges between every mind that's ever felt unseen, unheard, undervalued. The kind that makes sure no one ever has to feel like nothing again. They walked out of the auditorium together. Two women who had learned that love at last wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about finding someone willing to grow. Behind them, the empty stage held the echoes of Zara's voice, speaking her truth to the world. Ahead of them lay the infinite possibility of minds connecting, of bridges built to last, of algorithms that could map the human heart and help it find its way home. In the end, they had both been right. Nothing was wrong with either of them. They were exactly who they needed to be to find each other, to challenge each other, to build something beautiful together. They were brilliant, worthy, and finally gloriously seen. The bridges they would build, in code, in love, in life, would bend but never break, spanning every divide that had ever kept minds apart. And in the space between those bridges, in the connection they created, they would finally truly belong. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt unseen or undervalued, if you believe in the power of second chances and true partnership, then this channel is for you. We're building a community of brilliant minds who refuse to be invisible anymore. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because next week, we're diving into another story about finding your voice in a world that tries to silence it. And remember, there's nothing wrong with you. You're exactly who you need to be to change the world. See you in the next one, and keep shining your light.